Hey everyone, Charlie here. A few days ago I came across a Reddit post in which the poster claims that Shotgun Sienna is better than the Wiggle Beam Sienna. I presume they're specifically referring to the Pyromancer class, since using a Wiggle Beam build with a Battle Wizard or Enchained doesn't really make much sense. It caught my attention because I hadn't realized this was still a thing. As expected, people started debating in a friendly, reasonable, and logical manner. Friends and colleagues alike gathered from around the world to discuss the pros and cons of both schools of thought. It was really a wonder to behold how such a tight-knit community could be so understanding and united. No, I'm just kidding, it was pretty much the usual shit show you find on Reddit. People started going nuts over this claim, while others defended it to death. The main reason for the frenzy is that the original post didn't provide any explanation as to why they believed this to be true. This was probably done on purpose because they were fishing for controversy. They did eventually provide an explanation as to why they believe the shotgun build is better, but in my opinion it was somewhat lacking depth. Everyone has their own opinion about which is better, Wiggle or shotgun, and you know what they say about opinions. People that argue which one is better tend to not provide the proper details behind their reasoning, the psychological aspects of why you reach one conclusion or another. And yes, there is a psychological aspect to all of this. Bear with me. You know how people sometimes say that you become more patient with age? Well, that's not entirely true. The older you get, the more impatient you become. However, what you do become is more tolerant, since your brain has a tendency to accept certain aspects of life over time. The perfect example of tolerance, or more specifically intolerance, in regard to Vermintide 2 and pretty much any other similar game ever made, is always that typical small group of people who will, under no circumstance, tolerate others using certain builds such as Wigglemancer or Bounty Hunter crossbow spam, to name a couple. These people can literally take many hours from their daily lives to argue how much of an inferior and incompetent human being you are for using such builds. I've seen it dozens of times, especially on Reddit, and to be honest, it's actually quite amusing to watch these people rabidly attack others, as though they're defending their territory and their lives depend on it. I've even seen it in my own video comments, the perfect example being in my recent shade guide. You'll know which comment I'm referring to as soon as you see it. Feel free to check it out, since it will give you a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about. You can literally imagine the foam spewing out of these people's mouths. It's very entertaining. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. So which do I believe to be overall better? Well, after hundreds of hours of experience, I have concluded that the shotgun build is more effective overall. However, instead of leaving it at that or providing a technical explanation that most people will ignore for various reasons, I will try to explain how I reached this conclusion. And believe me, it's not as black or white as you might think. There are factors that nobody mentions, factors that require a ton of experience in order to reach such conclusions. I had originally started playing Pyromancer when Vermintide 2 came out. That was my first ever class in this game. I'd go all out with Sienna's ranged weapons, aka staves. Other people I'd play with would tell me I was doing it wrong. They'd insist that you're supposed to melee more and not focus so much on your ranged weapon. I didn't understand this since, first of all, I did a lot more damage with the staff than with my melee weapon, and second, I could do it indefinitely since I could just vent. You have to consider that those who kept on insisting I should melee more as Pyro are people who invested hundreds of hours into Vermintide 1. And as most of us know, Vermintide 1 was much more melee focused. Even though ranged combat in Vermintide 2 is designed to be fairly intuitive, especially for those of us first timers who have never played Vermintide 1, those who are criticizing me for not meleeing more were handicapped by their experience in the first game. This is perfectly normal and understandable, so I don't really blame them for having that mentality. Anyway, I insisted on playing my way, aka the intuitive way, and eventually realized that I was doing it pretty right all along. All of Sienna's classes in Vermintide 2 are predominantly range focused. The more I played, the more my playstyle evolved, until I eventually discovered the Wigglemancer build and stuck to it, almost religiously. I guess you could say that the Wigglemancer build is the equivalent to the Bounty Hunter crossbow spamming build, both heavily detested by a portion of the Vermintide community. Eventually I started playing other classes until little by little I played more melee focused classes such as a Shade and Zealot. Before those I played Carillion Waystalker and Sienna Battle Wizard, both of which are great stepping stones towards experiencing significantly more melee focused classes. Those are very ranged heavy but have fantastic melee potential, so you'll find yourself leaning towards meleeing on more occasions than you'd imagine. As I played Shade and Zealot, I realized the awesome power of having a strong melee frontline in this game. You can steamroll through a match just by pushing through anything and everything with sheer brute force alone. A big difference between a range-focused class and a melee-focused class is that a ranged class, you depend practically entirely on your ranged weapon. This leaves you vulnerable to getting hit, since you want to rely on your ranged weapon to take out stronger mobs, and want to avoid changing to your melee weapon as much as possible. More ranged uptime equates to more damage and kills. Therefore, your natural instinct will be to take steps backward to avoid getting hit, allowing you to spam your ranged weapon more often. With a strong melee setup in the front line, on the other hand, you will be pushing forward with brute force, as opposed to pulling back. And this brings us to the entire point of this video, and the topic at hand here and on Reddit: momentum. When playing Shade and or Zealot, I noticed that the team's overall damage and kills were drastically reduced, generally speaking of course, depending mainly on the map. It didn't take me long to realize why. We were completing maps in almost half the time. As most of you know, if not everyone, the number of mobs, especially hordes and specials, that spawn in a match are timed. In other words, the longer it takes you to complete a mission, the more mobs that will spawn which you will have to kill. You can see in past Wigglemancer gameplay videos I've uploaded, the damage and kill numbers were insanely high. I was doing anywhere from 15 to 25,000 damage per match, and at times in excess of 1,000 kills. There is an explanation for this, and it's not that I'm an amazing Pyromancer player. Every time a horde would spawn, we'd stop, gather together at a vantage point, and I would wiggle my beam and ult spam the horde and anything that would show up. This, in hindsight, was a mistake. The pacing was reduced drastically, because we'd stop in the same spot for a minute or so. This paved the way for more hordes and specials to spawn. Hence the larger damage numbers. It would just take us longer to complete missions, and Wigglemancer is not really compatible with pushing the team forward at a fast pace, since it doesn't make much sense to wiggle your beam staff at mobs that are literally a few feet away. Wigglemancer is most effective when mobs are at a farther distance. Playing melee focused classes encouraged me to complete missions at a faster rate. After hundreds of hours playing these more melee focused classes and then going back to Pyromancer, that's when I realized just how slow everything felt when using the Wigglemancer build. So going back to my comment about becoming more impatient with age, I've become impatient when playing this game, wanting to complete missions much quicker than I used to, and the Wigglemancer build wasn't contributing to this. I changed my beam staff trait from resourceful sharpshooter to heatsink, and focused my playstyle heavily on shotgunning. After experiencing both builds for a long time, I can honestly conclude how much more efficient it is to shotgun through a mission. Shotgunning allows you to keep the momentum going throughout missions. It allows you to keep a steady, faster pace, just as a strong melee focused frontline does. Heatsink allows you to shotgun almost indefinitely. It even allows you to wiggle your beam staff indefinitely, when appropriate. In conclusion, is the Wigglemancer build useless? No, not necessarily. It just depends on what you enjoy more, and whether or not the time factor is important to you. Is it OP by comparison to the shotgun build? No. In fact, I now believe that the shotgun build, when played properly, is even more OP. Is it more boring for your teammates than the shotgun build? No, because you will still be soloing hordes regardless, while everyone else watches. The difference is that instead of standing still and watching, at least everyone will be moving forward, so your teammates won't be as annoyed. Will you still be spamming your ult, albeit not as often? Yes, because your crits still reduce the cooldown of your ult, even without resourceful sharpshooter, just at a reduced rate. What my experience has taught me is that no matter how many hours you have invested into a playstyle, it's never too late to change and learn something new. This is where tolerance comes in. I tolerate everyone's playstyles, because I understand that there's a reason for each and every one. I understand that everyone has their own experiences, whether it's limited or intricate. Learning is a journey, and some are further into that journey than others. God, I love this game. I hope that my reasoning will convince those of you who swear by the Wigglemancer build to give the shotgun build a fair try. Let me know what you think, and please, let's keep the discussion civilized. I really don't want to see any foam spewing comments. Who am I kidding? Those are unavoidable. Thank you as always for taking the time to listen. If you enjoyed this video and found it interesting or useful, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye bye now, you take care.